There's a number I never tell people right away. Not because it's a secret, because if I say it too soon, they stop listening and go try it themselves before I've even explained why it works. It's sitting in a mason jar on my windowsill right now, and it's the reason I haven't handed a stranger $7 in over a decade. By the end of this, you'll know exactly what that number is and why the coffee shop down the road hopes you never find out. My name is Jeremiah Byler. Folks around here know me less as a coffee man and more as the fella who fixes what's broken and grows what's needed. Carpentry, mostly. Some seasons it's the garden. Some seasons it's whatever needs mending on the property. But coffee is something I had to relearn from my grandfather's notebook, a little leather-bound thing with his handwriting gone soft at the edges, because the way the English drink it today isn't the way it was ever meant to be made. I've been making my coffee way for 11 years now, and I haven't paid for a coffee shop drink since the spring of 2015. Not one. Trust me on this. Once you taste a proper cold brew, the burnt, bitter stuff they hand you through a drive-thru window tastes like a punishment. I remember the first time I made it wrong. Used hot water because that's what I knew, and it came out bitter and thin, nothing like what I remembered from my grandfather's kitchen. Took me 3 tries, maybe 4, before I understood that the mistake wasn't the beans. It was the heat. That's usually how it goes with these old methods. The English think there's some trick, some special equipment, when really the trick is just doing less and waiting longer. That $7 you hand over for a cold brew at the counter, maybe 6 ounces of actual coffee beans went into it. Beans that cost the shop somewhere around 12 to 15 cents worth of raw product. The rest of that $7 is cup lid, straw, rent, labor, and a markup built on the idea that you don't know how easy this is to make yourself. The specialty coffee industry has spent the better part of 20 years training people to believe that cold brew requires special equipment, special filtration, a 12-hour cold brew tower, and a barista's touch. None of that is true. It never was. A jar, cold water, and time is the whole secret, and it's been the whole secret since before electricity ever touched a kitchen. Think about that markup for a second, because most folks never do the math. A 5-pound bag of whole bean coffee runs somewhere between $28 and $35 at a regular grocery store. That's roughly 80 cups worth of coffee, hot or cold, out of one bag. That works out to about 35 to 44 cents a cup in raw beans. Coffee shop takes that same 35 cents worth of beans and turns it into a $7 product. That's not a markup. That's nearly a 20-time multiplication on the raw ingredient. No farmer, no mechanic, no carpenter I know operates on margins like that. Only an industry built entirely on convenience and mystery can charge that kind of money and have people line up for it every single morning without blinking. Why cold brew tastes smoother than hot brewed coffee? Because once you understand the mechanism, you'll never look at a coffee maker the same way again. Hot water pulls everything out of a coffee bean, the good oils, yes, but also the bitter compounds and acids that hot temperatures are especially good at extracting fast. That's why drip coffee left sitting for an hour turns sour and bitter. The heat rips those acids out quick and rough. Same way boiling a vegetable too long strips out the sweetness and leaves behind something limp and bitter. Cold water is patient. It only pulls out the sweet oils and the smooth flavor compounds slowly over hours instead of minutes, and it mostly leaves the bitter, acidic stuff behind in the grounds. That's the whole reason cold brew tastes chocolatey and mellow instead of sharp and burnt. It's not a different bean, it's not a different roast. It's just cold water doing a gentler job than hot water ever could. My grandfather used to say, heat is impatient and cold is honest. Took me years of drinking bad coffee to understand what that meant, but it's true. Heat rushes the extraction and drags out everything, good and bad, together. Cold takes its time and only brings out what deserves to be there. There's another piece to this, too. One most people never think about: acidity. Hot brewed coffee can run notably more acidic than cold brew, and that acid is what tears up a sensitive stomach, what leaves that sour aftertaste sitting on your tongue an hour later. Cold brew, made the slow way, comes out gentler on the stomach for a lot of folks, less bite, less bitterness, easier to drink black without needing to drown it in sugar and cream to cover up what's wrong with it. Now, here's how I make it. The way my grandfather taught it to me, and the way I've made it every single day for over a decade. All told, one batch runs about 38 to 42 cents and makes roughly 4 to 5 servings. Half a cup of coarsely ground coffee, about 2 ounces, costing around 35 cents if you're grinding a basic bag of whole bean coffee yourself. 2 cups of cold filtered water, a quart mason jar with a lid, or any clean glass jar you've got sitting in a cupboard, and a fine mesh strainer or a clean cloth for straining, which you likely already own. You don't need a cold brew tower. You don't need a $60 pitcher with a built-in filter, the kind they sell you at the kitchen store, telling you it's essential for proper extraction. My grandfather never had one of those, and neither do I. And I've made this every morning for 11 straight years without a single batch going wrong. Grind your coffee coarse, coarser than you'd use for drip coffee, closer to the texture of coarse sea salt. Fine grounds turn cold brew muddy and give you sediment in every cup. This matters more than people think. If you're buying pre-ground coffee at the store, most of it's ground for a drip machine, too fine for this method. Either ask for a coarse grind at the counter, or better yet, get yourself a hand grinder. Costs about $15 to $20 one time, lasts years, and you control exactly how coarse it comes out. Add your coarse grounds to the mason jar. Pour the cold water over top, slow, so all the grounds get wet evenly. Give it a gentle stir with a wooden spoon. Nothing metal, if you can help it. Metal can pull a slight tang into the brew over long hours. My grandmother always said, metal has no business touching anything that sits that long. I don't know the full science of it, but I've never had a bad batch using wood, so I've never questioned it. Put the lid on, loose, not sealed tight, and set that jar somewhere it won't get direct sun. A cupboard, a pantry shelf, or the back corner of your counter. Let it sit for 12 to 18 hours. I do mine overnight, same time every evening, so it's ready first thing when I rise. Direct sunlight will heat the jar during the day and speed up the extraction in a way that pulls out more of that bitterness we're trying to avoid. So keep it in the dark and let it work slow. In the morning, strain it. Pour it through a fine mesh strainer lined with a clean cloth or a coffee filter if you've got one, into a second jar or pitcher. Press the grounds gently at the end to get the last of the liquid out, but don't force it. You'll push sediment through if you squeeze too hard. Some folks strain twice, once through the mesh, once through a cloth, or filter after for a cleaner cup. I do that on Sundays when I've got the time. Most weekday mornings, one good strain through cloth is plenty. What you're left with is concentrate. Strong, smooth, dark as walnut stain. Cut it with water or milk, roughly 1 part concentrate to 1 part water, over ice, and you've got a cold brew smoother than anything sold in a paper cup with somebody's name misspelled on the side. Store the concentrate in the icebox covered, and it keeps a good 10 days to 2 weeks without losing its flavor. That means one batch made once gets you through most of a 2 week stretch of mornings if you're only drinking 1 cup a day. Now, here's a bonus trick, one most folks never hear, even from the coffee shops themselves. If you want a richer, almost dessert like cold brew without adding sugar, brew your grounds with a whole cinnamon stick and 2 or 3 whole cloves dropped right into the jar alongside the coffee. Strain them out, same as the grounds. It rounds out the bitterness and adds a warmth to the cup that costs you maybe 3 cents more per batch and tastes like something you'd pay $4 extra for at a counter, the kind of thing they'd call a seasonal spiced cold brew, and charge you nearly $9 for come autumn. Same trick, no extra dollar, just spice sitting in your cupboard already. There's a second bonus trick too, one I only started doing a few years back. If your cold brew concentrate ever comes out weaker than you'd like, maybe you used a touch less coffee than you meant to, don't throw it out and start over. Let a second batch of grounds sit in that same liquid for another 6 to 8 hours instead of fresh water. It'll pull the strength up without wasting anything. Waste not thinking, the same as my grandmother taught in the kitchen with everything else. Think on the real cost here for a moment. A coffee shop cold brew, medium size, runs $5 to $7 depending where you live. And if you're buying that 5 days a week, that's $25 to $35 gone every single week, upwards of $1,500 a year just on cold brew. Add in the occasional pastry or the larger size on a rough morning, and that number climbs higher still. Some families spending closer to $2,000 a year without ever noticing where it went, because $5 here and $6 there never feels like much in the moment. My jar method costs 40 cents a batch, 5 servings a batch, which works out to 8 cents a cup. Same 5 day habit costs you less than $4 a week made at home. That's not a small difference. That's over $1,000 a year staying in your pocket instead of paying for a paper cup, straw, and somebody else's rent. $1,000 is a good used tool set, or 3 months of a grocery bill, or a full season's worth of firewood. It's not nothing. It's a choice made every single morning about where that money goes. The coffee shop industry doesn't want this getting around because their whole cold brew business is built on convenience and mystery, making you believe this takes special tools and special training. It doesn't. It takes a jar, some grounds, cold water, and patience, same as it always has, long before anybody was charging $7 for what amounts to flavored water and ice. The convenience they're selling isn't really convenience at all. Not when the alternative is 4 minutes of your evening the night before. What they're really selling is the belief that you can't do this yourself, and that belief is worth a great deal of money to them every single week. This weekend, plain and simple. Find any glass jar in your kitchen with a lid. Even an old pickle jar works fine. Just wash it out good. Buy a bag of whole bean coffee. Coarse, grind it yourself, or ask the store to grind it coarse for you. Friday night, before you go to bed, mix your grounds and cold water in that jar and set it in the cupboard. Saturday morning, strain it, cut it with water or milk over ice, and taste the difference for yourself. Then do the math on what you spent that week versus what you'd have spent standing in that drive-thru line, and decide for yourself which one makes more sense for your kitchen. Next time, I'll be showing you the old trick for keeping butter fresh on the counter for weeks without an icebox at all. Something else the modern grocery aisle doesn't want you asking questions about. Until then, Folks, if you try this jar method, tell me down in the comments how it turned out for you and whether you noticed the difference the very first cup.